Hey guys, welcome back to Football Update. This is Andy.
And this is Robin.
So the first game of the championship game wasn't super exciting, in my opinion, Robin. The score is a lot different. The NFC game was very good, but before we get into those, just talk about some of the head coaching openings and other coordinator positions that have been filling up recently. Robin, your thoughts on some of them?
Yeah, the Dave Canales one in Carolina, I feel like that was the guy they sort of zeroed in on since I don't know how many people were interested in that job. They gave him a 6-year deal, and coaches' contracts, I believe, basically are fully guaranteed. So I'm sure he and whatever candidates out there were basically like wanting a full guarantee since the last two coaches have been fired in season. He did a great job as the quarterback coach with Geno Smith in the 2022 season, helping revitalize his career, then gets the offense coordinator job with the Buccaneers last year, and again, a resurgence for another bit of a journeyman quarterback in Baker Mayfield. So you needed someone to kind of help Bryce Young. I think he's about 45, so a little bit of a younger flavor to what they had with Frank Reich last year. A lot of work with that roster, which will be done with Dan Morgan, who was the assistant GM, now moves up to GM, and he previously worked in the Bills front office with Brandon Beane, so that's a very, going to be an interesting setup for their offseason and the upcoming season. The Atlanta Falcons getting Raheem Morris from the Los Angeles Rams, who was their defense coordinator, and an assistant head coach with the Falcons, 2016 through 2020, also pass game coordinator. Previously was a head coach about, 15 years ago with Tampa Bay, and he was the youngest coach in the league, and it didn't go great. But he's a guy that around the league is very well respected, and Leslie, the GM, really pounded on the desk at his end of season press conference, said if there's a guy that deserves a job in this league, it's Raheem Morris, and he ends up getting the job in Atlanta where he's been before. So hopefully he works better with Arthur Blank than their past head coaching hires. There had been talk about Bill Belichick, and maybe in terms of the head coaching positions this year, it's a bit too early outside of the very bad ending for New England for anyone to be very excited about it. And a couple of big ones today was Ben Johnson staying with the Detroit Lions. He was the hot young offensive assistant that everyone thought would get a job, and he is staying with Detroit. Boomer Esiason had said last week that it was a done deal for him to be the Washington Commanders head coach, and they were supposed to meet with him today, and he's on the way there. Reportedly, the Commanders got word that he was going to stay in Detroit. Maybe he's staying for another year to learn some things, get a better job, learn more about being a head coach. But I think that's the big thing for Detroit, who, suffered a tough defeat, which we'll talk about, but keeping that core together, both coaching staff and player-wise, is going to be huge for, as Dan Campbell said, it's going to be harder to get back, but keeping that continuity and great offensive group together is huge. Arthur Smith being named the offense coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll let you speak on that in a bit, but, going from the Atlanta Falcons head coach to that, and the Buffalo Bills promoting Joe Brady and Bobby Babich to the coordinator positions. Yeah. If you have any thoughts on those?
And then I think also our former coordinator, Ken Dorsey, has a job in Cleveland now.
Yeah,
so
yes.
That's going to be interesting.
Yep.
So my cousin from Cleveland was a little worried about that. I said that maybe Stefanski will do the play calling, so maybe it won't be as bad. Arthur Smith, for Steelers fans, I don't know how they feel about that. Maybe if he doesn't have the full reign control of the team, maybe he can just be good coordinating. But it was a very interesting move.
Yeah.
with the Falcons quickly, I guess Belichick was asking for way too much control.
Potentially, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you think he might sign somewhere this year? There's still a few positions open, or do you think he might wait till next year?
So I think the Washington and the Seattle ones are the ones that are open. I think Dan Quinn is interviewed for both. I would think that I think those teams, if they would have gone to Belichick, they would have done it by now. And it feels like one moved on from Ron Rivera, who's an NFL lifer. The other moved on from Pete Carroll, who was in his 70s. So it feels like those teams are wanting to embrace something new. I could be wrong about that, though, because Seattle could take on Dan Quinn, who has familiarity with the organization. But in Seattle, John Schneider had it written in his contract that whenever Pete Carroll left, he would have say in personnel. I think he said that his end-of-season press conference, or when Pete Carroll resigned or was pushed out, depending on how it's looked at or worded. And then I think Washington, Adam Peters, the new GM, I think he's going to want to have a lot of say. And if you bring in someone like Belichick, he's going to want... He may say that he's willing to work with personnel people, but he's someone who, as great as he is, has probably gotten stuck in his ways. So maybe a year away from things might kind of open up his mind to certain things, but also open up more jobs they'd be interested in, specifically one with, great quarterbacks. And that's maybe why someone like Ben Johnson is staying, because it's like, well, if I'm going to go somewhere for a job, I want it to be as perfect as possible and get one of those top 10 quarterback jobs where like a top 10 quarterback is there and I can win with them, similar to what Matt LaFleur did going into Green Bay. So
yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see where the last pieces kind of fall. I honestly thought that Carolina would be the last place to have a coach, but good luck to him. It's going to be interesting to see if Tepper will hold him for... I don't think he's had a coach for more than 3 years since he's been on.
I think it was 2.5 with Matt Rule, so yeah, at this point, yeah.
Yeah, just pretty crazy. So going to the championship games, first and foremost, despite the score, 17-10 in the AFC Championship game, it didn't seem like the Ravens came out to play. Like they had that one opening drive. I know Zay Flowers fumbled in that weird rule. If you fumble into the end zone, it's a touchback. But your thoughts on, like, the Ravens seemed like it was their year. Like they were just beating the best teams. And they just couldn't hold up to Kansas City.
Yeah, I think they had like 10 or 11 wins against playoff teams, and a bunch of them they beat the crap out of, including Houston the week before. And I thought going in, they were basically a juggernaut, and the only team that could get in the way of them winning was themselves, and that's essentially what happened. Todd Monken, he's the offensive coordinator for Georgia. The past 2 years, they won the national title. He had perfect balance with those teams, knew when to run it, knew when to throw it, knew when to, take everything underneath and then go for his shots. And in this game, I really don't know what the game plan was, because you have 6 touches between Gus Edwards and Justice Hill in a game that was never more than a 10-point game. Lamar had like a big run on a 4th and 1, and we rarely saw any design runs with him. And you saw the week before Buffalo's game plan, which I thought was a winning game plan, even though it didn't win. Some execution things here and there, and the defense not playing great with, the limited things that they had. It didn't really, again, make sense why they decided to throw the ball against the secondary with L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie and some really good other defensive backs that don't get mentioned, like a Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson. And they basically stuck to glue on those Ravens receivers and then made Lamar think about the blitz, think about staying in the pocket. And then that's when Chris Jones was able to wreak havoc, and George Karlaftis and a few blitzes here and there, and just kind of threw them off. And Mike McDonald early in the game was kind of getting owned by Andy Reid, 2 straight touchdowns to start the game. And, Kyle Hamilton was on Travis Kelce, and even he couldn't stop him. That just tells you how great playoff Travis Kelce is against any coverage, where probably arguably the best defensive player, at least back seven defensive player in the league, couldn't even stop him. So, yeah, it was just a very bizarre game for Baltimore, and it's one that basically ends their season. And you do have to wonder that they're not going to say that they missed a huge opportunity. They're going to say, next year there's chance and everything. But if you look at their cap situation, they're barely under the cap, and they got to worry about guys like, I'm not sure you want to bring back Odell, but he's somebody that you need receiver depth to begin with. So, and he counts against your cap anyway due to void years and something like that. Justin Matabuke is Pro Bowl All-Pro defensive tackle who was dominant this year. I think Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney are up for free agency, and they're veteran guys who played great, but do you want to pay them going forward? So, yeah, I think Baltimore missed a huge opportunity, but on the same end, credit to Steve Spagnuolo. First Andy Reid, but, Steve Spagnuolo is a huge assist on that, because ever since they brought him to Kansas City, they've known, except for 1 year, nothing but reaching the Super Bowl. And he always comes up with a great blitzing game plan or things to just throw off the top opposing quarterbacks. I mean, the only one that's gotten any sort of success, I think, consistently is Josh Allen. I think Joe Burrow won, but that was a game where kind of Mahomes was off, and as a result, they would get some turnovers, and Burrow took what was given to him. But Allen's the one that's kind of had mistake-free games and gotten, some great plays against Spagnuolo. But for Baltimore, for whatever reason, it was just not meant to be for them.
Yeah, it just seemed like they were out of the game the entire time. Mm-hmm. And, they also did run the ball.
Yeah.
That's the one weakness we've been hearing about Kansas City. I mean, that's what the Bills' game plan was 2 weeks ago. That there was just a field goal miss or time in the game. But to the NFC Championship game, Lions dominated the first half.
Mm-hmm.
I think people were crashing the champagne bottles a little bit too early because they, coming back, the 49ers scored 27 straight points, and then you have to think the two times where Dan Campbell was in the field goal range, he went for it. So you add those points, they could be going to a Super Bowl hypothetically. So your thoughts on the game? Was Dan Campbell too aggressive? Any bright future for the Lions? Do you think this was kind of like a magical year, and they might still be in a playoff run, but not make it this far?
For the Dan Campbell decisions, I think, the first one I didn't mind too much because I understood the line of thinking was they already cut it from 17 to 14. It was iffy field goal range for Michael Badgley. His numbers beyond 45 in his career, they're basically like 50-50. And it was only 2 yards, and they drew up a play to get Josh Reynolds open. The pass was maybe a bit off, but it was a very catchable ball, and, it doesn't go through. And if you go up 3 touchdowns there, or either right before the first half, there was a play where they're up 21-7, moving the ball. They get Jahmyr Gibbs on an angle route, and I think Goff was thrown off a little bit by pressure, but he got away from it, and he had Gibbs open and just missed it. And, if that scores or, they get a touchdown on the drive, they fail the 4th and 2, I think they have the game basically in hand. And then you have the weird play where Villador has a chance at interception, bounces off the face mask, hits Brandon Ayuk in the hands, gets that catch, makes it a 7-point game. Then you have the weird Gibbs fumble where he lines up in the wrong spot, and as a result, never really gets a clean handoff, fumbles, goes back to the Niners. They score very quickly again, and within less than a quarter, it's a tie ball game. And then they were just never able to recover. The 4th and 2, when they were down 3, 27-24, again, that was that weird field goal range again. I would have liked to have seen a different play call, but there was good pressure early on that play, and then forced Goff to kind of go sideways. But we praise Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson for their aggressiveness when it works. Unfortunately, this instance, it didn't. I don't think at first I thought the future was going to be rough for Detroit after that loss. And then with the news today that Ben Johnson's staying, I mean, there's a chance they might lose Aaron Glenn, who's a decent defensive coordinator, to a coaching job. But, the bread and butter of that team is the offense, the run game, the great play action. If they keep that together, they can practically beat anybody on any given Sunday. Now, they have to fix their corner room on defense. Obviously not great. Got to get a pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson. They do have $60 million in cap room. So it's going to be interesting how they navigate that, because you're going to want to give Goff an extension, and maybe an extension does lower his cap number, give you more space. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to want a new deal. Penei Sewell, he's going to want a new deal. But if you keep hitting the draft the way that they have, I mean, the only draft pick this year that wasn't spectacular was Jack Campbell, and he was a rotational backer, so he still contributes. But you look at Brian Branch, great nickel. Jahmyr Gibbs was thought to be overdrafted. He was a stud for them, despite that fumble. Sam Laporta was excellent. So if you hit, I don't even think you need to have a draft that good, but if you get another one 70-80% as good, I think you're in a really great spot. But, I think they have a good enough core. It's about contract-wise, how do you keep that core together? And as for the Niners, it wasn't pretty for Brock Purdy, but, he got the job done, made some plays outside the pocket, which, as steady as Jimmy G was for them, he was never the guy that could lead a comeback like that, make plays outside of structure, keep a calm head when things were going haywire. And the last 2 weeks, Purdy's had some bad moments, but when it's time to clutch up, he's done it. And that's gotten him back to a Super Bowl. Defensively, with how much they've invested in that D-line between Bosa, Chase Young, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, and some of the well-known backups, it's not produced to the level that they need it to in order to stop Mahomes. But now they have 2 weeks to get healthy, get ready. And, Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan with 2 weeks to prepare is going to be a fun matchup to decipher.
Yeah, and, in McCaffrey had a pretty good day, too.
Oh, yeah.
So, going to the Super Bowl, I think we're all trying to root against the Chiefs, but I just feel like the San Fran's more complete. They have way more weapons, and they got in my opinion, the best running back in the league to slice through that weak defense of. And again, the Chargers, the Chiefs overall are a bad defense, but their run game is where they're lacking. So that's definitely one advantage. And I think they showed in the second half with the Lions that having that many weapons eventually can just blow a team out of the water. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting Super Bowl, but that's just my prediction. I think it's going to be the 49ers winning this. How about you?
It is a couple weeks out, so we have to see how things come out. There is a couple huge injury things for Kansas City. Joe Thuney, the All-Pro guard, likely not going to play in the Super Bowl, didn't play this week, and they had, they were able to, not have it be an issue, surprisingly, against Baltimore, but I think they came up with a unique game plan to do that. I don't know how great it will be against, all those pass rushers for the Niners, assuming those guys play up to their draft status and money status. I do think, you're going to need Deebo Samuel to play big, Christian McCaffrey to play huge, Kittle and Ayuk. If those four play big games, I think the Niners win, but that Kansas City defense again, Spagnuolo, L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Charles Omenihu was a defensive end who had, I think, 7 sacks and 11 gains for them, and he unfortunately tore his ACL against Baltimore, so that could be a huge pass rush set / depth problem for Kansas City on that D-line. It's the only Super Bowl I was sure the Chiefs were winning in the past, 3 that they were in was the one against Tampa, and in that game, their offensive tackles got exposed, and, they couldn't do much of anything on offense. But I also think Mahomes was at a younger age where he freelanced a little bit too much, even though he was great at what he was doing. Whereas now, he kind of picks his spots to do that as well as anybody. And he, much of the year, didn't trust offensive tackles or receivers, but now he appears to, and I'm interested to see, do they do anything with Kadarius Toney, because he's been outspoken even the day of the game about, being healthy enough to play, and them not really letting him play. Sky Moore's, second-year player that had a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Both those guys had touchdowns in the Super Bowl, and they may or may not play. MVS went from a receiver they couldn't count on to someone who's made clutch catches in each of the last 2 games in contested situations. And, of course, Kelsey, you're thinking, this year he looks banged up and injured and all this and that, and he gets to the playoffs and he plays like his old self, and it's like, oh, okay, that's the Travis Kelsey we know and love, although opponents don't love it as much because it's just such a tough, impossible cover. But, yeah, I would love to go San Fran. It's like the Grim Reaper with, Mahomes at this point. He's become that new Brady where you just never can count him out, unfortunately, for opponents, but fortunately for KC fans.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting Super Bowl. Lastly, we want to talk about the Bills, our thoughts on that divisional game, the season on the whole, and the future. For me, the offense, they played nearly played the perfect game. There was a few drives where I think Josh could have gotten a first down and he went a little too deep, but he kept answering Mahomes, in my opinion. And I think the other thing we could both agree on, by that point, our defense was like shredded. You had practice squad players and just couldn't stop anything Kansas City was doing. But for me, overall, I'm happy with this year. Like, we were dead in the water, 6-6, and we climbed back and we took the East from Miami, which was pretty enjoying.
Yeah.
And with Dorsey gone now, we finally unlocked more parts of our offense.
Yeah.
Like the only reason Dorsey was starting to use Kincaid early on was because Knox got injured. But now you got Singletary. I'm sorry. Cook is killing it. I think he had the 4th most rushing yards in the league. You have Shakir. You got. Oh, sorry, guys. Oh my God, Kincaid. There we go.
Kincaid, yeah.
And it seems like Diggs is coming back. They're going to be at a bit of a crunch when it comes to the cap. Maybe we can see if some people might release a few million to help it out. But your thoughts on the season and what we might see next year?
Yeah, as opposed to last year where they went 13-3, but it ended so roughly and abruptly, and the Hamlin thing, and just how bad they performed in that Cincinnati game. And, this year, yes, they lose in the divisional round again for 3rd straight year, and, it's to devastating fashion. But, Joe Brady came in the rough spot when they were 5-5, and we were at that last Denver game, and not loving much of the play calling or execution. And again, it's not all on the old coordinator when things don't work out offensively, but since that point you saw more energy at the offense. You saw an ability to kind of say, oh, you're gonna force us to run, okay, we'll run, we'll keep doing it. And maybe they went too much to in that 4th quarter of the Chiefs game, which they only ran 3 or 4 times in the 4th quarter with backs, but the few times that they did, they didn't get anything out of it. So in that sense, I kind of wish they had a play action shot here or there, but it's a little bit of nitpicking. And if, Trent Sherfield catches one of the two deep passes that he had a chance at, or, that 65-yard bomb from Allen to Diggs, that connects, we feel maybe differently. Because if, one of those deep balls connects, the Bills score 30 points against the Chiefs defense that hadn't allowed that all year. And they probably come away with the win, but, is what it is. I think they did a great job of developing the auxiliary weapons and getting them involved. Like you said, Cook out of the backfield. Shakir was just, best catch percentage in the league. Hopefully he becomes a much bigger part of the pass game, or at minimum, one of the best slots in the league. Kincaid was a stud throughout the year. And even though he didn't really get targeted as much at times as we would like, he's a guy that can be 80 to 100 catch guy next year. You do wonder, they made an emphasis about having the two tight ends, and Knox only had 20 catches. Again, he dealt with injury and the coordinator change, and with a full off season and not having to go straight to Dorsey's playbook, but instead expand upon what that does and what Joe Brady wants to do. I am interested in seeing if he can develop more all those weapons and get more creativity out of it. The big thing is they need, I'm not sure if Diggs has lost a step, because the last 2 years, the first half of the season, he looks excellent. And then, teams either take him away or he slows down. But, when Josh Allen was at his best in 2020, it was, they had Diggs, John Brown with the speed, Gabe Davis is the number 4, and Cole Beasley as the best slot in the league. I think they have, they have Diggs, they have Shakir, who can be that beast slot. They need to find, maybe a cheap veteran and then one or even two rookies. And this draft is theoretically loaded at the receiver position. So if they can get that set and also combine it with, the power run, stuff that they had down the stretch of the year, they can be, the best of both worlds in that sense. And that's why I think they need to, be a great team that can score, 30, but also grinding out when they need to. Because I think they were one of the smaller big play teams in the league, whereas a couple years ago, they were one of the bigger ones, but maybe depended on it too much. They have to, find that, comfortable balance between the two. And if they can get that, sky's the limit for the offense. And that's probably what it'll need to be, because to come out of the AFC, you're playing all the top quarterbacks. You got to score and make them score as much as possible. And hopefully one of these years the defense will be healthy. Terrell Bernard was, really incredible. And when him and Matt Milano were together that first month, I think that was the best linebacker play of any two players in the league. And unfortunately, Milano gets hurt against Jacksonville and London, and then Bernard has a nicked up thing here or there, and he pushed super ultra hard to play in that game against Kansas City. And Brandon Beane said it was kind of an emotional thing to tell him that he wasn't going to be able to make it, but he's going to be the quarterback of the defense. And Bobby Babich, going from safeties coach 2018 to 2021, developing Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer together as a great duo. Then 2022 and 2023, getting Tremaine Edmonds to have his best year before free agency. And then, Bernard missing a bunch of training camp and still playing at elite level when the year started, and getting him and Milano to playing together. Then Dotson when Milano went out, and then Spector and, AJ Klein. And, I just hope they never have to depend on AJ Klein in a big playoff game against Mahomes again. But, one of these years you just got to get healthy on defense, stay healthy, and then, build up the armory for the offense. Because you have a Josh Allen who can, with all the right pieces, if he can avoid the mistakes, which I think he did a better job of doing down the stretch of the year, and also lean into the big plays here and there, they can, beat anybody in the league, and they're going to need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just do want to commend the defense just for holding for so long, and then just, there was just too many injuries in the Steelers game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. But I'm very excited. And the last thing I do want to say before we get going is people are saying, how some people on the TV are saying Josh is trash and all this. It's 20 years ago, they were saying the same exact stuff about Peyton Manning. He would never break through and win the big one. I just think someone of that talent, sooner or later, will get in at some point. But looking forward to the Super Bowl and looking forward to the off season. I mean, as much as I miss football, it's nice to have a little more time for your projects on the weekend.
Yeah.
But that'll be a football update for us today. This is Andy.
And this is Robin.
Have a good one.